let you blow up the phone.
Okay, can I just say one thing?
What?
Allahu Akbar! Hello, look at LTM Reviews. We'll get you caught up on the oldest movies. Happily Never After. So, Happily Never After was released by Vansgard or something. I can't remember the name of the studio, but it was also the same studio that did Valiant and Space Chimps and its sequel. So, in a world kind of like Shrek, you have this. This is going to be a very confusing plot, but just hear me out, and I'm going to do the best I can to do this. So, in a world kind of similar to Shrek, you have this world that's both good and evil, and the fairy tales, there's some sort of book that helps you figure out which fairy tale goes in order, and that has to go by the book. Every fairy tale has to go by the book. But then you got this evil woman played by, oh gosh, this woman, I can't remember her name, and I can't remember the actress that played her. She was very forgettable. The villain, you got this evil witch who wants to take over the world by mixing all the fairy tales and having all these fairy tale thugs come to her and makes her take over the world. And you got this princess or this girl that's sort of similar to Cinderella, who has to team up with this guy or this prince or this guy played by Patrick Stewart who has to save the world. Oh gosh, I hate the plot of this movie. I could not follow this movie. It is, out of all the plots I've seen, Happily Never After has to be one of the most complicated plots I've ever sat through. It's very complicated. I could not follow this movie. It's very, very, very confusing, and it just doesn't make any sense. The characters. Let's start with the bare basics. The basic problems with this movie. The movie's basically a Shrek ripoff. I mean, I'm just gonna go ahead and say it right now. This movie is a full-on ripoff to Shrek, and that's what makes it more shameless. The characters are really dull. I could care less about them. Like I said, the villain was not interesting, and her motivation was very weak. The casting, I will give it this. The casting's fine. I mean, you got Andy Dick, Wallace Shawn, Patrick Stewart, Sarah Michelle Gellar, some very decent choices. Like I said, the side characters are very annoying. I really don't like them. They're just very dull. The animation's very cheap. I mean, I guess it's not the worst animation I've seen. I've seen worse, but it's pretty close. It's very, very annoying and very basic. It's very, very generic and very cheap. Just cheap. There's nothing much to say about the animation other than it's uninspired and cheap. The story, like I said, is confusing and very complicated to follow. The soundtrack is pretty decent, I'll give it that. There are a couple songs I did like. The purpose of this world doesn't make sense. Like I said, it's just so confusing. I don't know what's going on. You see, the thing is, Shrek was a very strange movie, but at least I was able to follow it, and I was able to get into the characters and understand the motivations. Here, you don't get any of that, and it's very, very, very strange, and it's not strange enough. And it tends to sound and look strange instead of feel strange, like Shrek. And the humor is the worst part of the movie. I did not laugh once. I think I did laugh at least one joke, or maybe chuckled in one scene, and that's involving Rumpelstiltskin, but that's about it. I could care less about everything. It was boring, it was tedious, it was cheap, it was forgettable. I don't think I'm going to remember this movie at any time in the future. Overall, Happily Never After was just dull. And when it's dull, it's certainly unpleasant. I can't recommend this movie to anyone unless if you want to look at it as like a so bad it's good movie like The Room or Freddy Got Fingered or even Grown Ups 2. But other than that, I say stay away from it. Happily Never After gets a 3 out of 10. I did not like this movie one bit. It's not the worst, but it is probably the worst Shrek ripoff I've seen so far. I've already reviewed one, and that was Chicken Little, but at least Chicken Little had a great idea. This movie did not. And I really don't know what to say other than just don't watch it. If you like it, fine. If you grew up with this movie and said, yeah, I like this movie a lot, that's fine. If you like it better than Shrek, that's fine. But as for me, I say just get away from it. Okay, that was Happily Never After. What's your favorite Shrek ripoff? Please subscribe, comment below, let me know. This is LTM signing out, and I'll see you guys next time.
Dad, am I ugly?
What nonsense. I'm looking at you right now. You're the most beautiful girl in the world.
Baba, am I ugly?
Very much.
You know that really, really tall girl that you go to school with? Well, that's me. 16 years old, 6'1.5".
That's a huge bitch!